Let me introduce you to Denis, probably right. The most unlucky speaker of today, who almost missed the conference and his slot. So all about the fails with the flight and all your topic, you can tell everybody now. So I'm giving you the microphone.
It works, right? Yeah. Hello, everyone. So happy to be here. Yeah, my connection flight got delayed and I was almost late. Had to spend overnight in Warsaw before coming here, but I made it and I'm happy about that. Thank you for joining. It's great to be in Vilnius again 3 years later. I was lucky to participate here in the last pre-pandemic event in 2019. And back then, my talk was mostly about team self-organization, how to bring team to self-organization, and how to understand that the team is self-organized enough to be let go by the Scrum Master or Agile coach. Today, as you see, we're going to talk about a little bit different topic. It's about team self-design, and about next 40 minutes or 35 minutes, we will talk about what self-design is, how to introduce self-design to your organization, when is a right situation to introduce self-design of your organization, and of course, why to introduce self-design to your organization. A few words about myself. My name is Denis Salnikov. I am a Scrum Master. I do quite some stuff, as you can see. I'm head of Agile practices at a startup unicorn called PandaDog. I'm a certified trainer at Coactors together with my wonderful colleagues, and I'm also an organizational design consultant and less coach in my own self-employment consultancy called Agile Expat. I started working in the Agile fields in 2014, still call myself a Scrum Master because this is what I find to be the nature of what I'm doing, and I'm currently based in Krakow, Poland. And just to make sure that you have trust to what I say, the experiences and things I will describe today, they are not just from some book or from some wonderful idea in the internet. It's from my real practice, and here you can see some of the companies I've been working with, mostly product startups and scale-ups in their growth, hyper-growth, or search for product market fit stages. Fintech, logistics, document management, different stuff. So yeah, let's talk about self-designing teams. Self-organizing teams versus self-designing teams. Well, in our Agile community, in global community, we have lots of buzz around different stuff. And I think one of the most popular buzz is about people who prefer Scrum and people who prefer Kanban and continuously argue which one is better. Who has ever participated or seen discussions around Scrum versus Kanban in your organization or online? Just please raise your hand so they can see. Great. Yeah, and if I personally, knowing something about Scrum and Kanban, had to call out one single thing that all Scrum followers and Kanban followers agree on is the importance of self-organization. Here you can see quotes from the very original Scrum Guide, which was released in 2010. And there you already can see that teams are supposed to be self-organizing, meaning that they decide on their own which things to work on, how to get them solved, and who within the team will work on that. On the right, you can see the quote from a famous blue book of Kanban, or essential Kanban condensed book, where it says that one of the key principles of Kanban is manage the work and let people self-organize around it. But this understanding of importance of self-organization, what it plays, roots even deeper in the past. So if you are not familiar with the origin of the term Scrum and where it comes from, in 1986, that's like a hell of a lot of time ago, right? I personally wasn't even born in 1986. In 1986, Drs. Takeuchi and Nanaka from Japan, they released their white paper called the New Product Development Game. And in that white paper, what they were trying to achieve is to summarize the experiences of successful Japanese companies, because back then you know that there was so-called Japanese miracle, when the company, which was like heavily damaged, ruined during the Second World War, and which also lost, has suddenly become like one of the leaders of the world's economy. So Takeuchi and Nonaka interviewed people from various successful companies in Japan and tried to somehow summarize the principles which were making those teams successful, how these teams were structured, how they were working, what they were putting first in their processes. There were like 6 things, 6 key points they summarized. But here, so first of all, they introduced the word Scrum, and they found that this is a good analogy from the game of rugby. And they said that one of those things all these companies share is self-organizing project teams. So as you can see here, they were describing self-organizing team as something that operates as a startup company, which has a lot of complexity, which has many things unknown, and therefore it has to take full responsibility for its fate, deciding what to do, how to approach it, what risks to take, what initiatives to take. About the same period of time, like 80s, early 90s, Dr. and Professor J. Richard Hackman from the United States has been conducting a lot of work about around different topics of sociology, mostly about leadership effectiveness, the design of self-managing teams and organizations, team performance, and etc. Dr. Hackman has unfortunately passed away in 2013, but his legacy in terms of sociology and organizational design cannot be underestimated. One of the things which serves as his legacy is the so-called Hackman authority model, which is kind of summarized here in that picture, where you can see in the bottom 4 different levels of team's autonomy, and on the vertical axis you can see description of different kinds of work that these teams either delegate to management or take on themselves. So there is self-managing team, and it actually monitors and manages its works and also executes their tasks. And there are self-designing teams, which in addition to that takes care of the team's design and its organizational context. So these 2 models, like everything we know about Agile and Hackman's authority model, they got kind of closer to each other and merged together in 2020 when the latest Scrum Guide update was released, and the term self-organizing teams was replaced with the term self-managing teams, just meaning the same. Therefore, this is the level of autonomy which Scrum team is supposed to be placed at. And I don't know, I have some kind of history with that model probably because 3 years ago in the same conference center I was also given a talk about self-organization. I was using that model there as well. But today I don't want to talk about self-organization, not because it's in the past. It's, I think, still some North Star and guidance for many companies, but there are also companies who have already stepped beyond that thing. There are already lots of companies who are trying to introduce so-called self-designing teams, meaning that in addition to executing tasks, monitoring and controlling their progress, they also take care of defining their context and their organization and their design. Or as Mr. Hackman described in his book for Leading Teams, they're not intentionally doing both. They can do either one of those things. So either defining their design, so how the team is structured, how many people are there, what those people are doing, what skill sets they possess, etc., and organizational context. So yeah, here we can just make a quick fix and replace and with or, because it changes a lot, right? Some traits of self-designing teams. When we talk about modifying its design, what it means in practice, that teams may choose who are on the team and which people are joining the team, or even of which people the team is composed. They can define or adapt the list of required skill sets. So for example, I don't know, we know that yesterday our team needed only like quality specialists, like Java engineer and JavaScript engineer. Now our company introduced a mobile application, and we also want to have some specialists in iOS and Android in our team. So our team's borders have expanded together with our definition of done. And the last but not the least is also those teams have ability to influence who is on the team, so they can either hire or fire people. not only hire, because getting team members involved in the recruitment process is something very common, and you can't surprise anyone with that, but also fire. Why so? Because even in the Scrum Guide, it clearly states that one of the traits of the developers in the Scrum team is that they hold each other accountable as professionals. And if you work with someone in a team, you see that that person is not performing as you agreed, they are not adhering to the quality standards or to the just Scrum values or some principles you have in the team, that team should be able to like escalate that topic and get it somehow solved. So either that person gets moved to another team, or they get fired from the company, or they, I don't know, sit down with their line manager and come up with some improvement plan which that person can apply. And the second half is organizational context, so which part of the organization to work in. Like, for example, if you have tribes, tracks, value streams, I don't know, another fancy name for more or less the same kind of organizational structures, they can choose which tribe to work in, or they can choose which business objectives to pursue or which feature to develop. Because like very often organizations don't bring problems and business objectives to teams, they just bring specific solutions to implement, right? Which is also not good. But yeah, how to introduce self-design? I will share first a high-level plan for a kind of self-design workshop, which was initially supposed to be in the end of that talk. But then I understood that it's very difficult to keep the sweetest thing to the end, so I want to introduce the thing first and then talk about why it is so important to do self-design. So yeah. These two gentlemen, whose contribution to the world of agility I adore a lot, those are Craig Larman and Bas Voddy, in case you don't know, co-creators of LESS framework, large-scale Scrum. One of the principles for LESS adoption they suggest is to heavily rely on volunteering, meaning that when we have some issue to address, we don't do management by spreadsheet, where managers decide that, I don't know, Mike, Jesse, and Nicole will address that issue, but we clearly state the problem that we have, we clearly state what are the issues with that, and we then look for volunteers. And they also highlight here that probably one of the reasons for not that many volunteering being applied as the companies is that managers are just feeling the loss of control. So yeah. That self-design workshop, which can be held in any company, I would say, has 4 steps. So the first one is very clear. It's about clarifying the goals and the purpose. And the key thing you need to get there is to answer existential questions. So why are we doing that? Why the way we were structuring teams before doesn't work? Or why we were approaching certain problems before doesn't work anymore? What we want to achieve with that? What we hope to get by the end of that activity, meaning the workshop itself. Also clarify questions and answer questions and clarifying concerns. After that, we need to provide specific guidelines and define constraints. And this is the most important part, I would say, because otherwise what is supposed to be a self-design exercise will go into completely nuts and you will have just a mess and chaos. So there should be some constraints. We need to clearly define what is the size of the team we want to look for, and usually it's about 7 plus minus 2, right? We want to define which skill sets we want to have on each team to make those teams really cross-functional and cross-functional feature teams. We want to clarify if there is a need to have a specific experience with a specific component or specific business logic that it needs to be in each every team. So this is basically experience with certain components and subject domain expertise. We need to, I would say, clearly state that this team should be able to deliver end-to-end, meaning that we are not aiming to have component teams. And yeah, component teams are not welcome this time. And so on and so forth. So basically, when you or together with your colleagues, together with managers who will be designing a self-design workshop in your company, you need to have clear mind of what is the ideal team you aim for. And then you need to do some reality check and understand, okay, this is the ideal team we want to get, but what can we actually achieve that so that it's becomes a realistic goal. And then you have a clear description of that set up as a limitation for people participating in the self-design workshop. Then self-design happens. How it actually looks like, I will show a little bit later, but usually you need to have, if you're forming several teams, not one team, you will want to have some stations prepared for them, being like frames if you are doing that in some online collaboration tool, or being just several flip charts around the big room in an offline setup, so that these would be stations where a team could land to. And they will probably also need these frames and flip charts to do some drawing, to do some discussions, to fix some agreements as they form their teams. You will need to somehow visualize the skills that participants of the workshop have. For example, like, I don't know, I'm Denis, my key specialization is Python. I also know something about databases. I also know how our unique core component works, and people can just have some kind of badges or pieces of paper with these things written there, or like somehow color-coded so that they are visible from a distance. Provide enough space, like here, for example, and observe the dynamics and adapt to adapt in further rounds, because there will be several rounds. You can't come up with the ideal team from one round, from the very first attempt. And yeah, this is basically the last step of your 4 stages self-design workshop. So you will, after the time box expires and you have some stations with some proto teams or draft teams formed, you, being the facilitator, also the managers, also maybe some domain experts, they can walk around and try to check what's going on. So first of all, whether the teams have fulfilled the guidances or constraints that were provided. If we have, like, for example, if we said that there should be no team bigger than 7 people and we have a team of 15 people, then we probably need to tell them, okay, guys, that doesn't work that way. You need to break down. Things to pay attention to from my experience. First of all, of course, size. Second of all, and it's kind of discussable, personality types. I'm not a big fan of typologies, of different kind of typologies, but what I've observed is that, for example, if you have a team which consists of outstanding professionals, and those professionals are highly motivated for what they do, but all of them are introverts, you will never have drive and energy in that team. And for creativity to thrive, you need to have drive and energy in your team. So maybe if you or someone in the management team have a good understanding of personalities of your engineers and like team members, you can challenge that somehow and ask them, okay, guys, we see that you have a very good team in terms of size, in terms of skill set, in terms of knowledge of our architecture, in terms of knowledge of our product, but where the energy will come from in your team, like, how you see yourself working as a team on a daily basis. Critical gaps in the skill set, obvious. Ability to deliver end-to-end, obvious. I mean, most probably you will not, if you are doing self-design on a very big scale, like, for example, I don't know, up to 100 people, there is a chance that you may not come up with all teams being feature teams, being able to deliver end-to-end, but at least you need to have most of the teams feature teams. And when I say most, I don't say 6 out of 10, I say like 8 out of 10, or like 7 out of 10. And openness towards multi-learning, which is a very important topic. If we jump back to the white paper by Takeuchi and Nanaka, we'll see that factor number 6 they described there was that people in those organizations were very open to getting new skills and to learning new stuff. And by what I mean here is not like that fancy word T-shape, because what T-shape means for me is that I'm good at one thing and I'm kind of suck in all other things, but I know something about them. What we aim for is multi-learning, where people have like their main specialization, secondary specialization, tertiary specialization, and those people are willing to develop those specializations over time and to teach others to develop those specializations. So yeah, after you do that, let's say, reality check with all the teams, you just repeat the same exercise for like 2 or 3 rounds, the same exercise being step 3. and most probably by that time you come up with a set of teams you wanted to self-design. And by the way, if you are doing that on a big scale, like for example from more than one team, very often the question arises if it's a Scrum. If it's Scrum, the question arises how those teams will choose their Scrum Master. And the basic answer, they should choose. So you should have some list of candidates. Those candidates should be there, and after you've formed the teams, those teams should have some kind of interviews with those Scrum Masters where they should try to like persuade the team that they are the best to do this job. You have the design now, but like design without the purpose or like without strategy is useless, right? So now I will share 3 strategies for introducing self-design. The first one is some critical urgency which may arise. And I'm not talking about some production incident or some sudden bug in the incident, because this is when it's already too late and this is too minor to do some significant organizational changes. I'm talking more about some new product hypothesis which you will test for the next, I don't know, quarter or 2 quarters, and you want to have several teams dedicated to that. I'm talking about some incoming regulatory requirement, because I've seen a lot of that in the fintech industry. You work and tomorrow just, I don't know, some new requirement comes up and you have half a year to address that, and it's a hard stop. You don't have any ability to postpone it, so you need to address it somehow. These kind of urgencies I'm talking about. So yeah, we already had Mr. Nanaka, Mr. Takeuchi, and Mr. Hackman. Another awesome gentleman which will join that list is Mr. Daniel Pink, which you all, I guess, probably know. His book Drive is very popular in the Agile circles, and for a certain reason. In this book, he describes the traits of extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, how intrinsic motivation works, and why extrinsic motivation, being money, title, etc., do not perform as expected in the creative work, in the work which related to thinking about something, not doing something with your hands. And you know probably those things like mastery, autonomy, and purpose. Those are 3 things that heavily affect the intrinsic motivation which individuals have. Usually there is also another variation of that model. Some people also add there the 4th dimension being the sense of relatedness. So besides mastery, autonomy, and purpose, how also I myself as an individual feel that I relate to the work I'm doing. But we'll stop with only on that model. And yeah, there is a description that heuristic task, being an intellectual work, which has no instructions or defined path. We know about complex domain from Kinefin framework. One must be creative and experiment with possibilities to complete the task, meaning that, so these are the circumstances where, according to Daniel Pink, intrinsic motivation beats extrinsic motivation. And yeah, so getting back to our urgency. So some urgency lands on our company's table, and we need to do something with that. And what usually starts in these situations? What managers start to do? They start to do what I call management by spreadsheets. So they define themselves who will work on that. They may even come with a project plan themselves, and then like they just pull those people out of their existing teams, put them together, and say, make it work. Usually it doesn't get like that. And in my personal opinion, and also based on the social psychology and organizational psychology, the reason for that is fear of losing the control. Because like if I'm a manager, my title says clearly, I'm here to manage. If I'm not managing, if I'm delegating that to the team, why do I need to be here? I will probably get fired and I will lose my job and have no money to pay my debt and like interest rates. So, but how this affects people and individuals in the team? First of all, by choosing whom they will work with, we take away the sense of autonomy. So when somebody comes, I don't know, once in my lifetime I had a very weird experience when we had a very high-performing team, even several teams, which were working on a very interesting product. And suddenly we used to have proper like Scrum with sprint reviews, with stakeholders being there delivering feedback. And after yet another sprint, we had a sprint review where the team was again delivering some, demoing some increment and sharing some observations with the stakeholders. And in the end, after everyone said thank you, that was a wonderful demo, and we were very happy about the increment, they just said, and by the way, we have a new regulatory requirement, and from tomorrow on, you will step out from your teams to work on that. Imagine how it worked out. In that specific case, people got this work done. It took them 4 months instead of 2 months, and after that, all 3 of them left the company. Long story short. Why so? Because besides lack of autonomy, that approach also takes away the sense of purpose from them. Like, there are 2 things. Like, one thing is when somebody comes to you and says, there is a very important business thing we need to address. It's very crucial. If this doesn't happen, our company will lose that much money, or our company may potentially earn that much money. That means that we will probably need to get these, and these done. Out of you, how many would like to join that initiative? And then the self-design happens. The other one is, as I just described, you and you join this thing. But maybe there were people in the room who were willing to join that, but they were not even asked. So, in fact, that lack of purpose affects not only the people who get chosen for the project team that way, but also everyone else in the room. So what's left then? Only mastery. And what it usually leads to, in my experience, is that, first of all, people in the team try to hypercompensate lack of autonomy and lack of purpose. How they do this? They apply overcomplicated solutions. I like to call it resume-driven development or CV-driven development. When you apply some fancy technologies, you apply some fancy architectural approaches where they are not applicable, only to later put it in your resume that you did it. They may come up with solutions that do not serve the purpose because they don't know the purpose. They don't have a buy-in to that purpose. And yeah, as a long-term thing, getting motivated only by mastery doesn't work. And here was supposed to be another Dilbert meme, but something went wrong. So there is just a picture, but what was there in few words? So you know the term tiger team, right? Tiger team. It's when someone comes and says, oh, we have that urgency, we are creating a tiger team to address that. That's from some another fancy management book. So here the manager from Dilbert comes and says, oh, I'm so happy that you're on this tiger team, and to motivate you, we are ordering you tiger costumes to wear. And the person says, oh, thank you, how I couldn't be even more happier now. So I call this sweetening the pill. When the manager did something, then they see some negative effects and they try to sweeten the pill. And this, speaking in the words of Peter Senge, is today's problems comes from yesterday's solutions. And if that solution was made by that manager, maybe it made sense not to even apply that solutions instead of trying to sweeten the pill over time. By the way, very great book about learning organizations. As you can see, I highly recommend it. So yeah, second opportunity for introducing self-design. Organizational growth. Obvious one, you're hiring, your teams are getting too big, or maybe you're even on a hyper-growth stage. For example, I've been 3 times already in companies which have grown like 2 or 3 times in headcount over 1 year. Company I currently work for, PandaDoc, 2 years ago it was 12 teams. 1 year ago it was 33 teams, now it's 47 teams. That's what in the startup environment they call hypergrowth. So yeah, another meme, doesn't work, about management by spreadsheet. I will save our time. So yeah, what you can do in this situation, not to take away autonomy from people. You can do the self-design exercise, and these are just some screenshots from the Miro board we were using in our company to do self-design in one of our requirement areas or tracks. So as you see, it's as I described in my 4 stages of workshop. We've presented the current picture and how we see it looking in the future from the skill set perspective. So number of teams, how many individuals we need to have in any team, in every team, and what skill set we need to have in every team. We've collected concerns from people, and we've answered those concerns and answered those questions. We've also suggested them, because we had two potential structures presented there. One you see there, another one is outside of the screen. We suggested them to vote and decide which structure they agree with, given what we're going to work on. And then we conducted the self-design in several rounds and had teams. All this was because teams were just growing too big. So originally we had only this team. Then we've hired 5 more people over time, and we understood it's too big for one team. We've decoupled that into 2 teams through the same exercise. And then when we've hired more people and they got onboarded through those teams, we've once again decoupled them through self-design. So there is no limit to address that, to apply self-design. And the last but not the least, organizational transformation, which is not the best thing to do, but especially if it's a big bang transformation, you better avoid it. But you can also do self-design there. Yeah, so you can just quickly read it. Yeah, so this is what I call like top-down fed. When management comes from some conference or from some training class and say, from tomorrow on, we're going to become agile, and we will transform into agile teams, and that means that our business analysts will now be called product owners, and our project managers will now be called scrum masters, and we will become an agile company as everyone does. But what if I told you that you can basically self-design the whole company? Of a reasonable size, of course. Back in the 80s and 90s, still the same Mr. Hackman even was aware of ability to apply such practices, and he called it enabling structure, meaning that the structure, the organizational structure that the company has, it should be not restraining like a classical hierarchy where you introduce managers who oversee the team, then you introduce managers to oversee the managers, then you introduce VP of managers to oversee the managers who oversee managers, and so on and so forth. But you create structure which enables your teams to thrive and to perform. And with that, you get effectiveness not only on the whole company level, but only on each team's level. So at PandaDoc, we actually applied self-design to the whole organization already multiple times. So yeah, it was again done online, sorry. So there are no fancy photos of people walking around the room, but there will be some later. So yeah, at some point after we had already, I think, 12 teams working on the same product backlog, we understood that it becomes very difficult for our product owner to keep everything in their head. And we said that, okay, probably we are too big now and we need to somehow introduce some microstructures within the organization. In less framework, it's called requirement areas, but in other organizations it can be called. Anyway, we call it tracks. So we decided to form those tracks. We formed those around different ideal customer profiles which we have. You can simplify it saying it's user personas. So we have different user personas using our product, and they use our product for different purposes. And we decided that those tracks will focus on needs of different personas, and they will address different business metrics that showcase how those personas are performing in terms of income for the company. So we've created the vision for those areas. We've gathered everyone together on this online call. We've introduced that. So we had a lead product person chosen for each area. They pitched the idea. They tried to make it really sticky and interesting so that people get enthusiastic about each of those areas. And then we set how many teams we want to have there. We called it quota. So how many teams we need to get there. And then we ended up with first teams, people choosing which area they want to go to. and then each area doing a self-design session to form their teams. And that's how we ended up with, I think, back then, 14 or 15 teams. Now it's 47, and we've redefined these tracks multiple times already. We do it approximately once in a year because the market changes, the competition changes. Now it's also a recession in the US market, so the amount of bets we want to make and the amount of investment, being teams we want to make on each of those bets, can change. And our CTO, being our product owner, makes those decisions. Another example from, oh, it looks really awful here, right? So yeah, I've been recently at the LESS conference in Warsaw. If you've never been there, join it. It's almost as good as Agile Tour Vilnius, believe me. So two Scrum Masters from the company called Avast, which you may probably know. They're developing the software for security for private laptops and also for company infrastructure. They were describing about the same experience of doing transition to LESS and through self-design in their company. So they also held it online, and it's as I described. So they had stations for suggested teams, the amount of teams they want to have, some visualization for a skill set or visualization for domain knowledge they want to have. And then by the end of, I think it was 3 hours exercise, they formed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 teams. So this is the scale where self-design can be still applied. And by the way, if you think that this is something fancy and new, this is not. Because here you can see, for example, the article from March 1976 from the Administrative Science Quarterly magazine from the United States, where they describe the experience of self-designing company called, I think it's Seesaws, or it was a camping on Seesaws, but basically they describe how it was applied there and what were the outcomes of that. If you just, in case, are interested to learn more about self-design and how it works, you can check out the case studies pages on the LESS Works website, because each and every case study went through a self-design stage. And here's, for example, material from a company MTS, which is based in Russia. Nowadays, we don't like to tell about it anymore, right? But that was still a very interesting case, and I know some people who were involved there. So that was still in pre-COVID era, so they had self-design workshop in the offline. Yeah. So I've told you interesting story. I provided you with some tool, but probably it's now makes sense to talk about not only theory, but facts, why this is important. So I will start with my observations. They're very quick. So if we lens back to these 3 stages, or 3 parts intrinsic motivation model, what I've observed over time is that, first of all, ability to choose whom to work with in a team positively affects autonomy. Ability to choose which goal to pursue or which tasks to solve positively affects purpose and mastery. And self-designed teams usually have stronger sense of ownership, better quality, better focus on outcomes versus outputs, meaning that they care about what is the business outcome we've delivered, not how many story points we've delivered in the screens. And yeah, they are more likely to learn multiple specializations, as multi-learning is something you aim for in your company. But who am I to tell you that this works? I have a title, I have a company, I have a talk title self-design, so I'm probably a fancy promoter of self-design, right? Let's talk about numbers. So first of all, about retention. There are a few statistics from different public media, so you can find and check them online. So first of all, according to Report Linker, 83% of employees with opportunities to take on new challenges say that they're more likely to stay with the organization if they're engaged. At the same time, 56% of not engaged and 73% of actively disengaged people are looking for jobs and opportunities, and they're open to joining new companies. And at least for the US market, losing an average employee costs each company about $15,000 to $25,000 for a replacement, because you need to find person, you need to onboard them, you need to educate them. the person you've spent this money on before have left your company, and these were basically investments that went away from you. So this is not very clever from the economic perspective, right? Engagement. So that's not all news about money. Disengaged employees cost organizations between $450 and $550 billion annually. It's only in the US markets. It's not even globally. High engagement, high retention companies are 40% more productive than the average company. And if you have a good product management skills in your organization, imagine how much value you can get out of those 40% of additional productivity. And highly engaged business units realize a 41% reduction in absenteeism and 17% increase in productivity. Absenteeism is basically being at work but not doing work. If you ever saw the good old film Office Space, there was a very nice interview where they interviewed the developer who said that, well, I'm working about 15 minutes in a day. All the rest of the day I'm doing some stuff for myself. And the last but not the least, quality and value delivery. This is what in the end Scrum is about, right? So highly engaged organizations saw 40% fewer quality defects. According to Gallup, I think it's State of the Organization's 2019 report. Engaged employees are 17% more productive than their peers, and highly engaged organizations have 21% higher profitability than their peers. So if you feel that you have freedom to suggest self-design to a company, and you feel what my manager will tell about that, just show them those numbers and make them count those economics for your company. Thank you, and we still have, I think, some time for questions, right?
Thank you very much. And my question would be, who puts those constraints for design of the team?
Well, usually it's done together with management, but not the management who is there to oversee team's productivity, but management who is responsible for the product's success. Because probably you have there people who understand the business, so they can describe which business domains you need to be expertful in.
Doesn't it put the boundaries on the solution, on the design of the team, so that the team comes to the same solution that the management wants?
This is an interesting idea, and this is more like a manipulation. And I also like manipulations. So usually when I come to a new company and suggest self-design, and people say, but we already have a great idea. And I ask them, okay, what can go wrong? They say, they will come up with the wrong design. And I tell them, okay, but you can talk to them, try to challenge that, and if they persuade you, you can agree, right? Right. What else can go wrong? Oh, they will say, we don't want to do this. And I say, perfect, because you already have a solution on your hands, so you can apply this solution, and still people will feel that at least they have been asked. So it's not bad. Of course, when preparing those constraints, ideally it's better to have someone like Scrum Master to be there to challenge those constraints. But you can't do it without those people, because it otherwise can be too detached from reality in terms of business and in terms of architecture.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Felix, I knew you were going to raise the hand.
Thank you. So 2 questions. First of all, if you have a bigger corporation and they want to start on the Agile journey, would you recommend doing something like this already in the very beginning? Or a little bit later in the journey? And the other question would be, what if or did you have the case that some people feel like the leftover team, like I wanted to go into other teams and have not been accepted, so now you have the team of leftovers? How would you deal with something like that?
Yeah, 2 stories here. So for the first one, I'm not propagating the LESS framework here, but there is 3 books about LESS framework, and one of them, I think the second one, has a whole part describing organizational changes, like transformations. And Craig and Bas, they're not like some person like I who works with funny, small-scale startups. They work with big companies like JP Morgan, Bank of Singapore, etc. They recommend the practice called parallel organization. So when you want to introduce the agility to your old existing organization, instead of trying to change the whole organization, You educate top management so that they understand all those things and many other things called systems thinking, like systems thinking, psychology, sociology, etc. You educate them. You spread the word in the organization, and then you call for 50 volunteers to join the parallel organization where there will be no reporting to old managers. There will be only a CEO or CTO on the top, and those 50 people formed into teams. And then within that parallel organization, they do the self-design, and they incrementally grow it over time. So each 3 months or so, they add additional 50 people there from the original organization. That's how they suggest to approach that. And the second question was about, the funny thing is that the teams I've been describing where it was, so the teams I've been talking about here, this was initially the leftover team. When this the whole company exercise was done, it happened to be a leftover team because it was a track supposed to work on the API and in integrations, and nobody wanted to go to work on API and integrations. But over time, we managed to overcome this tendency. So first of all, we found some volunteers and promoters within this team who actually understood why we are doing this and what's in there from business perspective and what's in there from technical perspective, and they helped us to spin this out. But this is unavoidable. Believe me, like having one team or two teams of leftover people is much better than losing about, I think, 30 to 40% of your staff due to big bang transformation, how it usually happens in companies.
We have 2 questions online.
Okay.
So one is, trust is essential for self-designing and self-managing teams. Can mutual trust ever be restored once it's been broken? If no, why? If yes, how?
It's a very long and deep question. I think it can. It sometimes may require some external help, just like, for example, in a family, the psychotherapist can help the family to restore the trust that have been broken for some reason. Yeah, but nobody can promise you that this will work, and nobody can tell you how much time it will take.
Okay, and another one is, imagine a small startup wanting to go this way. What would be the first thing you would recommend they do, and what would they look for to know they are doing it right and the teams are truly self-designed and self-organizing?
I will just once again quote the last book, and I would say the first step is educate everyone. Educate everyone so that they start to think holistically about their product. In startups, it's usually much easier than in a corporation. Make them start taking into account not only technical aspects, but also like business aspects, market aspects, investors, all these things. Make them also understand system thinking and why we want to have it structured this way, and then roll out the change. So just as an example from real life, for a less flip to be done in a regular company, the preparation cycle time usually takes from 3 to 6 months. This is the time when we educate top management. This is the time when we educate people who are volunteering initially, and only after then the change happens. But this is if we are talking about changing corporations. With startups, it's usually shorter in my experience, and it's usually possible to fit it within like 2 weeks or like 1 month, but it will depend on the amount of people you have and the amount of people you will get involved. For example, those guys from Avast, which I brought up, as far as I remember, they didn't introduce too much additional education before doing that flip. They just did few classes on systems thinking and organizational design, and then they did this flip. So it's also possible.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. And
So I think that was it. So before you leave, I just want to remind you that we are really looking forward to get feedback for Denis' presentation on Menti. So here's the number. So please go and leave something. So thank you again, Denis.
Thank you. Thank you.